So in this one, I want to talk about Shigaraki and how he got decay, along with the huge reveal about that is eventually going to come in the series, and is probably going to be the reason why Shigaraki ultimately breaks away from All For One and foils him in some way, if not just straight up killing him. So as we know by now, All For One brought up Shigaraki and pretty much trained him to be the despicable villain that he is today. He conveniently found him after he had inadvertently destroyed his entire family, and then became his surrogate father afterwards. But what if I told you it goes much deeper than that? Because this all goes back to All For One's original goal of trying to get One For All. Because One For All, of course, is the constant in his life that is always trying to stop him. But also it's pretty powerful as well, and it's also something that's always been out of his grasp. And that's because of the way that One For All has manifested over the years. It's developed this ability to resist the All For One quirk itself. So naturally, over all of this time, he's been trying to figure out a way to obtain One For All. And one way or another, he and Yujiko did figure it out. And it's that they need pure unrequited hatred in order to do that, but like in the purest sense. And for some reason, All For One himself doesn't have the necessary level needed in order to bypass the failsafe that is built into One For All, which stops it from being taken. So he and Yujiko figured that the best way of doing would be straight up taking a child before he's fully developed, of course, and raising him into a pure hatred vessel. But this also goes into the other plan that All For One has, and it's upgrading his hardware for his software, meaning that his body can only maintain so many quirks and so much power. So after nurturing this child of hatred, they would eventually modify his body, Nomu style, so that he is the ultimate vessel for All For One to transfer into, so that he can not only just take One For All, but he can also harbor all of his quirks and no longer have to worry about his body breaking down. And that's pretty much what they have done with Shigaraki up until this point. But in chapter 350, it was revealed that Shigaraki was not the only candidate for this. In fact, they had like this whole little makeshift orphanage going on, and Dabi himself was a part of it, and also it's heavily implied that Overhaul was a candidate as well. Because we see at the beginning of chapter 158, when Overhaul was a child, he's pretty much in the same kind of orphanage room that Dabi was in chapter 350. But on top of Dabi like burning down this orphanage place, I guess it just came down to all of them just not being good enough, which is why he ultimately settled on Tomura. And a little added bonus is that Tomura, of course, is the grandson of Nani Shimura, one of All For One's previous nemesis and holders of One For All. But the other big thing that came to light in chapter 350 was how All For One was dressed when he showed up to retrieve young Dabi after he had burned himself, trying to impress Endeavor. Because his appearance here all but confirms the long-standing suspicion that I, and I'm sure many others have had, and it's that he is in fact the same individual that we see in chapter 235, who drops off Shigaraki, who at the time was still Tenko Shimura, to his mother. But anyway, in that chapter, Shigaraki is like having some flashbacks of, and he remembers this time when he was dropped off by this dude who was All For One at his house. And afterwards, it specifically shows us that he is 5 years old at this time. This is important because Tomura didn't really have a quirk before this. He was pretty much implied to be born quirkless. And given the information that we've received in the series so far about how quirks manifest up until the age of 4, pretty much means that Tomura was born quirkless, since they're showing us that he's 5 here for a specific reason. But it's only hours after being dropped off by All For One that decay suddenly manifests within him, and it leads to the unfortunate destruction of his entire family. And then after this, he winds up roaming the streets, and as I said before, All For One conveniently finds him and takes him in. It was all 100% premeditated, of course. This is also the reason why he gives him the hands of his deceased family members to wear, to further keep him in control, but also to further nurture that hatred that is so crucial to his plan of taking One For All. I know, it's all pretty sick stuff, but All For One is like a despicable, unredeemable villain. We're not supposed to like him in the slightest bit, and we're supposed to, of course, feel bad for Tenko/Shigaraki, because ultimately he is a victim of circumstance. I mean, he is totally innocent. I mean, at first, of course. I mean, he eventually goes on to murder many people, but that's besides the point. But the real unknown thing here is DK itself. We have no idea where this came from or how All For One got it. Because when Yujiko is describing the decay quirk to Shigaraki, he says, a rare variant quirk manifested within you, one we've never seen before. So this means it's like a similar quirk to Eri's rewind quirk. She has like a variant that was never seen before as well. It didn't come from her parents or any of her bloodline. It kind of just manifested uniquely within her. So that begs the question of like, where'd they get it? Is it even really important? They just randomly get it from somebody and they were like, hey, this is the perfect quirk that we could just give to Shigaraki so that he can accidentally kill his family and then get all deranged and whatnot, you know, for our ultimate goal. And I speculated before that this could have been what Izuku's original quirk was. And I know you're saying, no, Deku was born quirkless. Yes, I know, we all saw the first episode. But if we want to go into some fun, you know, real deep theory territory, there's a 5-year age difference between Shigaraki and Izuku. So it's possible, not saying that it's the case, that when Izuku was born, All For One took his quirk. Now that goes into a whole other can of worms, you know, why would he be monitoring him and all that stuff, but we do know that Yujiko was hiding in plain sight in the very first episode. He's the one who tells Izuku that he was born quirkless. So he could have just been lying to him, and maybe he took the rare variant decay quirk from him and then gave it to Shigaraki. And then of course that would be a nice reveal later on and bring everything full circle. Maybe not, but you know, just some fun speculation. But speaking of huge reveals, like I said in the beginning, this all still has to come to light. The fact that All For One was the one who gave Shigaraki decay and, you know, caused his family to die, and he was just nothing but a big pawn for All For One in the end. And then, like I said, this will be the turning point for Shigaraki. So either this is the moment where Shigaraki is finally strong enough to break free from the control that All For One has over him, because as we've seen, he's kind of melding their consciousnesses together until they're one being, which will ultimately just be All For One, with the hatred imbued from Shigaraki. But then that still leads to hatred, and Shigaraki being this big, grotesque, pseudo-Nobu perfect All For One vessel that he is. He's not just suddenly going to turn face and be like, well, I've seen the error in my ways, guys. So maybe it's at that point that Shigaraki becomes the big overall final villain of the series. But as I've also said many times in my previous videos, I think Izuku is somehow going to revert or just simply change Shigaraki back into Tenko Shimura, because we do see that there's some kind of lingering semblance of Tenko within Shigaraki's consciousness, and that aspect of him actually is calling out to Izuku, seeing him as the true hero that could possibly save him. But let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. If you like the video, guys, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.